Snow pressed down from the sky in great, listless sheets, slow and ceaseless as sorrow. The high peaks were locked in white, the trees cloaked heavy with ice lace, and the wind moved like breath through a hollow throat. Nothing stirred except the crows wheeling low, their black wings sharp against the stormlight. She came through it bent at the waist, wrapped in what had once been a wedding shawl. The fringe was torn, matted with sleet, her boots crusted stiff with frost. Her gait was broken, one step trailing behind the other, her weight uneven, as though her body had forgotten the rhythm of walking. Beneath her shawl, her dress clung thin to the bone, unhemmed at the bottom where it had frayed against brush and bramble. She did not carry a pack, nor wear gloves. There was only a pistol at her belt, the kind that would shatter your hand if you fired it wrong. The trapper's hut lay up in a pine-buried hollow, a day's ride north of the last settlement worth naming. It was a place most folks had long stopped looking for. Smoke never came from the chimney. No path marked the snow from the main trail. Only the lean snare lines and the hides pegged out to dry against the back wall hinted that the place was still lived in. She saw it in pieces, first the slant of the roof, then the glint of iron on the latch. The wind gusted then, hard enough to throw her sideways, and her knees buckled. Her hands went into the snow. She did not rise. Her body shuddered once, twice, then went still except for the faint tremor of breath. Snow began to gather on her shoulders, made her a small hill among the drifts. Inside, the trapper had already stood once that morning, drawn to the window by the way the light dimmed sudden. He had not seen her, only the trees swaying like drunks and the white rising past his sill. He sat again, scraping sinew from a stretched pelt, the blade whispering its work, breath puffing faint from his nose. He lived quiet and long alone. What few words he had left, he kept shelved behind his teeth. But the dog heard her. A long-limbed cur with one ear bitten down and the other straight up, it went to the door, whined once, then pawed hard enough to knock a tin cup from the bench. The trapper paused. His eyes went to the door, to the dog, then to the fire. He laid down the blade. He stood. He opened the door just as the light shifted again. His eyes fell on the shape in the snow, soft, crumpled, too small for a man, too still for anything that lived. The wind slapped cold against his face. He stepped forward. The snow went past his knees by the time he reached her. He bent without a sound. She was light in his arms, far too light, as if half her flesh had already melted away somewhere along the trail. Her head lolled against his collarbone. Her hair was damp and full of pine needles, the color of spilled ink on snow. He carried her inside, still without a word. The dog backed away from the open door, tail low but wagging, its eyes wide on the bundle in his arms. He laid her down on the cot near the fire. The hut was one room only, wood smoke thick and warm in patches. She did not stir, not even when the warmth hit her. He unwrapped the shawl. Her lips were cracked, rimmed with blue. There were old bruises on her wrists, faint yellow-green like fading petals. He checked her pulse, 2 fingers at her neck, slow but there. The dog whined again, paced once, then settled near her feet. He poured water from a kettle into a tin cup, then soaked a rag. He pressed it to her mouth, then her brow, then set to work peeling off the frozen boots. Her toes were white. He cursed under his breath, the only sound he'd made since morning. When she woke hours later, she did not speak. Her eyes fluttered open like moths, then fixed on the roof, unmoving. He sat across from her, carving a hunk of wood into something shapeless. The fire cracked behind him. She watched him for a long time. Her mouth opened once, then closed again. Her hands stayed limp at her sides. They were 2 quiet creatures in a world hushed by storm. Neither asked the other's name. Neither needed to, not yet. The wind cried outside like a child too long lost, and the snow did not stop falling. The morning came slow and gray, with the fire burned low and the windows rimmed in frost. He'd risen before the light, as always, stoked the embers and boiled a kettle. The dog lay curled by the hearth, belly full from last night's stew bones, ears flicking at the scrape of the ladle. She hadn't spoken, hadn't moved much either, but her breathing was steadier now. Color had returned faint to her cheeks, and when he passed her a tin cup of warm broth, she took it with both hands, fingers trembling, lips chapped, but she drank it all. He watched without staring, a habit from years gone, knowing how easily wild things spooked. She didn't thank him, just held the empty cup in her lap like it was something sacred. Snow still fell, but lighter now, flakes drifting in lazy spirals through the pine boughs. The hush of it filled every corner. Outside, the traps would be buried, the path gone. No one was coming and no one would. He didn't ask what had driven her here. Her clothes said enough. So did her silence. Later, she tried to stand. He was at her side before she swayed twice. She brushed his arm away, soft but firm, pride still alive under the frostbite. He didn't touch her again. She made it to the door and back, looked out at the trees, then shut it without a word. By the third day, her voice came back in pieces, a rasp at first, the kind of sound you make after crying too long or not speaking at all. She asked for water, then later for salt. She salted her broth like it was penance, didn't flinch at the burn of it. He offered her a blanket he wasn't using. She nodded once and wrapped it around her shoulders, then sat by the fire with her knees pulled tight, eyes fixed on the flames. When he went out to check the line nearest the cabin, she followed at a distance. She wore his old coat. It swallowed her whole but kept the wind off. The dog ran ahead, paws punching through the drifts, tail wagging like a banner. She didn't speak then either, just watched how he worked. The clean way he reset a sprung trap, how he marked the tree with a notch and moved on. She limped slightly, but never asked to stop. That night she helped stir the stew. He gave her dried beans and meat from the cache. She cut the onions slow, hands steady. "You live here all winter?" she asked finally. He looked up from the tinder bundle he was binding, nodded. "Alone?" Another nod. She didn't answer that, just stared at the pot a long while, then added a pinch of salt. They ate in silence. Wind tapped the shutters in a restless rhythm. The dog snored at their feet. Her hair was clean now, combed with a bone pick he'd left by the basin. She smelled faintly of lye soap and pine ash. When the fire died low, he lit another lamp. She watched the flame bloom and blinked like it surprised her. "I didn't know where else to go," she said, quiet as prayer. He didn't answer, only looked at her long enough that she turned away. The days passed like river stones, each one different but worn in the same current. She helped where she could, cleaned fish, chopped kindling with clumsy hands. She had a knife scar on one forearm, long-healed but still ugly. Sometimes he caught her rubbing it when she thought he wasn't looking. She didn't ask for stories and he didn't offer them, but sometimes at night she hummed under her breath. Low, wordless, songs that seemed older than memory. He never asked her to stop. She started walking farther into the woods when the snow lightened. Not far, just enough to be out of sight. She always came back before dark. One night, as she unbuckled her boots, he asked without looking up, "See something out there?" She paused. No, just needed air. He nodded, tossed another log on the fire. But the dog had gone with her and come back bristling. Wet nose, tail stiff, eyes tracking something in the trees. Neither of them mentioned that, not yet. The cold deepened again. Snow fell with a sharper edge. The traps came up empty 3 days in a row. She sat at the table, patching one of his shirts with thread she'd pulled from her own hem. Her hands were steady now, her eyes clearer, but there was something still coiled inside her, something waiting. That night, as the wind howled and the fire spit sparks onto the stone, she whispered a name in her sleep. Not his, not hers, just a single name, brittle as old paper. He did not wake her. Instead, he sat beside the fire, blade in hand, carving careful notches into the wood, one after another, until dawn lit the edges of the frost-blurred windows. The cold had gone from bitter to brittle, the kind that splintered the air when you breathed too deep. Ice webbed across the creek, thick enough now to hold a man's weight. The trees groaned beneath their burdens, limbs creaking like old bones in a cradle, and still no thaw in sight. He took to checking the traps before first light. She stayed inside now, chopping roots or stitching hide, the dog curled against her shins. The hush of her presence had become a thing he noticed only when it was absent. One morning he came back with blood on his shoulder, not his, but the fox's that gone for his hand before the trap snapped closed. She cleaned the bite with warm whiskey and soft cloth, her fingers gentle, though her mouth was set hard. "You should have let it go," she said. "Would have bled out either way," he answered. Still, she kept checking the wound after, lifting the bandage each night and rubbing in a paste made from pine pitch and bear fat. He didn't stop her. Some nights she didn't sleep. He'd find her standing by the window, eyes on the tree line, watching, listening. Once she said, "I think someone followed me." He didn't ask how far or for how long, just reached behind the stove and brought out an old rifle, laid it across the table without ceremony. "I won't bring trouble here," she added, eyes on the wood grain. He didn't answer, only carved another piece from the antler he was shaping, the sound of his knife steady as breath. The rifle stayed close after that, loaded, clean. Later, when she took to the woods again, she carried the pistol more openly, not tucked in her belt but gripped in one hand, her fingers red with cold. He watched her leave, then watched the trees after she vanished. The dog always went with her. It didn't bark anymore. They didn't speak much of the past, but the air between them was thick with the weight of things left unsaid. Some nights she sang again, low, aching songs with no language, only sound. And once, when the wind was soft and the moon sharp above the ridge, he asked, "You got children?" She hesitated, then shook her head. Had. No more was said. One afternoon, she brought back a bird with a broken wing, cradled in both hands like a prayer. It was a thrush, feathers rimmed in frost, heart fluttering wild beneath her thumb. "Found it near the trap line," she said. He raised a brow. "Can't fly, won't last." "I know." Still, she made a nest for it in a box with wool scraps, fed it grain and meltwater. It lasted 3 nights before dying. She buried it near the stump out back and didn't speak the rest of the day. He left a piece of carved wood on the table that evening, small and smoothed round, shaped like a bird in flight. She didn't say anything, only held it in her palm a long time, thumb tracing the wings. That night the wind shifted. It came down hard from the north, bitter with scent, wood smoke not theirs. The dog bristled again. She froze near the door, eyes sharp. He checked the window, nothing but white and shadow. Still, he barred the door after that, and when he slept, he kept the rifle within reach. In the hush between midnight and dawn, she stood over him once, silent, and by the time the first crocus pressed through the snowpack, their routines had folded into each other like layers of wool, quiet, warm, unspoken. She boiled the bones after dinner now, saved the broth, poured fat into jars. He showed her where the dry mushrooms were kept, how to steep them slow so the flavor deepened. She laughed once when the dog stole a strip of meat from the table, and he turned at the sound like he hadn't heard laughter in years. That night he carved by the firelight as always, but his hands moved slower. Her laughter sat in his ears, strange and full. He didn't speak on it, didn't look at her directly. But when he passed her a sliver of birchwood the shape of a fox, she held it to her chest. The next morning, tracks circled the cabin. Not deer, not rabbit, man tracks, deep-pressed and straight-lined, made by someone who knew how to move quiet in snow, someone not just passing through. She saw them first, froze with the kettle in her hand. He joined her at the door, stared at the trail that looped once through the trees and then disappeared downhill. "2 sets," she said. He nodded. Her hands curled around the handle. "They know I'm here." He didn't ask how she knew, just walked to the stove, picked up the rifle, and checked the chamber. When he set it down again, she was already pulling on her boots. "We have to be ready," she said. So they readied. He boarded the back window. She stacked firewood against the walls, lined up tins of food, dug the pistol from her coat and laid it on the table like a ritual offering. Her eyes were flat with purpose, no tremor in her fingers. She did not speak of Tom again. 2 days passed, then 3. The sky turned slate, the snow gone to mud where it melted fast and refroze at night. The cabin grew tense, breath held, waiting for a knock or a shout or worse. Then, on the 4th morning, the dog did not come back. It had gone out before dawn, chasing scent or sound, but when the sun rose over the ridge, the clearing stayed empty. She stood in the doorway long after he'd come back from searching. "I should have known better than to rest," she said, not angry, just resigned. That night they didn't light a lamp, sat by the dark fire, backs to the wall, listening. A branch cracked near the woodline after midnight, then another. A hush followed. He brought her the rifle. She took it, sat with her knees drawn up, arms wrapped around the stock. "If they come," she said, "don't talk, they'll know your voice." His nod was almost imperceptible. He sat near the door, knife in his belt, axe within reach. The wind rose. No one came. At dawn they found the dog, limping, blood crusted along its flank. A bullet had grazed the shoulder. She knelt beside it, pressing her cheek to its fur. Didn't cry, just held the shaking body close and murmured something into its ear. He watched them both. Something heavy stirred in him, not anger, not fear, just a deep, bone-deep need to keep her safe. They fortified the cabin after that, dug shallow trenches near the tree line, hung bells from wire. Every sound mattered now. Still, there were moments, small ones, quiet and fleeting. He caught her humming again, not the sad songs from before, but something steadier, like the tune she'd heard from a field worker once. She sliced carrots as she sang, knife steady, voice low. He brought her the fox pelt he'd finished curing. She wrapped it around her shoulders without a word, but she did not take it off all day. And once, as the moon rose fat and gold over the hills, she reached for his hand. He let her take it. In the hush between the wind and the silence, two people found stillness together. Not peace, not yet, but the beginning of it. The thaw came sudden and violent. One morning the trees were white and still. By noon the roof sang with meltwater and the creek roared awake, hungry from its long sleep. Mud swallowed the paths, roots emerged like bones. Inside the air turned damp and sweet with rot. The fire no longer crackled, only whispered. He pulled the shutters back to let in the changing light. She opened the door, stepped barefoot onto the cold earth, eyes closed as though listening for something beneath it. "It's starting again," she said. He didn't ask what. They cleaned the place together, as if preparing it for someone else. She scrubbed the floor with pine water. He cleared the shelves, sorted what would keep from what had turned. The rhythm of it soothed them both, as though order might keep danger at bay. But every night, they still kept the rifle close. One evening, as the sky bruised violet and the dog gnawed an old bone by the fire, she traced a line on the tabletop with her finger. "There were two of them," she said. He set his cup down. "The first was the one I married. A kind man, loved the stars, wouldn't kill a fly unless it begged him. That was Tom." Her voice didn't tremble, just moved slow, like something pulled from a deep well. "The second came after the war. He looked like Tom, walked like him, but inside he was, hollowed, not all at once, like the pieces were falling off slow." She looked up then, met his eyes for the first time in days. "I stayed, thought I could hold the rest of him together. I was wrong." He didn't reach for her, didn't offer words, just let her speak into the space between them. "I left when he broke my arm, but only after he told me he'd never let me go." The fire shifted, shadows climbed the walls. The dog whined and laid its head on her foot. "He'll come," she said, "and he won't come alone." He nodded once, no fear in his face, just a quiet, grim readiness. She touched her side where the pistol hung again, not out of nerves, just habit. They started training after that. She hadn't fired in months. Her hands were out of practice, but her aim was true. He showed her how to brace her elbow against a tree, how to breathe with the shot. She listened, corrected herself without complaint. "Why are you helping me?" she asked after a morning session, sweat on her brow. He looked past her toward the ridge. "Because he won't stop, and you deserve to." She nodded, and that was enough. That afternoon, they heard voices downriver. Faint, maybe a mile off, carried on the spring-wet air. Two men arguing. One laughed, sharp and cold. She stiffened. He stepped away, fetched the rifle without a word, passed her the smaller one he kept behind the stove. They dug in. Night fell with no visitors, but the voices haunted the trees. A smell of pipe smoke drifted once through the pines. The dog refused to leave the cabin's side. She cleaned her pistol again and again, her hands sure now, movements precise. When she finished, she looked at him long. "If I don't make it." "You will." "But if I don't, burn whatever's left, don't let him have anything." He held her gaze. "You're not leaving this place in pieces," he said. She didn't answer, but her jaw clenched hard, like something inside her had just stitched closed. That night they did not sleep. They sat by the fire, rifles across their knees, and waited for the forest to speak again. Dawn broke red. The kind of red that meant blood or warning. The wind was still, the creek hushed. Even the birds seemed to hold their breath. He woke first, though he hadn't really slept. She was already dressed, standing by the window, eyes fixed to the tree line. "They're close," she said. He nodded, pulled on his coat, checked the rifle, loaded the second one. She'd already packed a satchel, water, bread, 1 jar of fat, 2 bullets wrapped in cloth. "We don't run," she said. "If we do, he'll chase." "I know." She turned to the dog. "Stay," she whispered. But it didn't. It followed them to the edge of the trees, tail low, body pressed to her side. She didn't push it away. They moved east through the timber, not toward the voices, but around them. She led. He covered the rear. They didn't speak, only signaled. Hand up, wait. 2 fingers, move. By midday, the wind picked up again, carried smoke with it. He paused, crouched beside a fallen spruce. Cabin. She looked at him, face hard. Let it burn. So they kept on, deeper into the ridge. They knew the land better now, where the shale slipped, where the old trap line crossed the gulch. She moved with purpose, like someone hunting something that had once hunted her. It was dusk when they found the first man. Not her husband, the other one. Young, fair-eyed, fingers blackened with cold and powder. She raised the pistol first. "Where is he?" The man laughed, coughing, bitter sound. "You think he ain't watching? He's always." The rifle cracked once, sharp and clean. He lowered the barrel slow. "We don't need his kind talking." She stared at the body a long time, then nodded. They buried him shallow, no words. Night came again, this time with stars. They made camp near a granite ledge, back to stone, fire small. She slept with her hand on the pistol. He did not sleep at all. In the hour before dawn, a twig snapped. They rose together, rifles leveled. A figure stepped through the trees. Broad shoulders, familiar gait, a face that had once known hers. She said his name once, voice low. The man grinned. "You really came all this way to die." "I came to end it." He didn't raise a weapon, just took another step, eyes gleaming. "You were mine, you said forever." She said no, the trapper said. The man's eyes flicked toward him. "Who's this? Another dog to sick." Then he lunged. She fired first. Missed. The trapper's shot hit him in the thigh, dropped him. But he rolled, fast, pulled a knife from his boot, hurled it. It caught the trapper in the ribs. She screamed, dropped to her knees, fired again. This time she didn't miss. He fell face first, didn't move again. The forest was silent, even the dog whimpered. She crawled to the trapper. His face was pale, breath shallow. "No," she whispered, "stay." He reached up, touched her cheek. "Told you, you wouldn't leave in pieces." Blood bubbled at his lips. She pressed her hands to the wound. "You're not leaving either." He didn't answer, but his eyes stayed open. Long enough to see the stars again. Weeks passed, then a month. She built a new fire ring near the creek, dug the ground with her hands where it thawed, planted seeds he'd once gathered, though he never said what they were for. The cabin didn't burn after all, just the shed. She fixed the window he'd boarded, hung the fox pelt above the hearth, carved her own marks into the doorway. Each morning she fed the dog, walked the trap line, sat with the rifle across her knees. Not waiting. Just living. Sometimes she spoke aloud. Not to the trees, not to the dead. Just to the silence. Like maybe, somewhere in it, he could still hear her.